The European Commission has proposed a revision of the copyright monopoly for the net, which appears to be pretty much a pathetic roaming for Netflix, coupled with Liberty nightmares. We've got Henrik Alexandersson with us from Berlin to comment. This is Liberty Talk 45. Anders Ansip, the former Estonian Prime Minister, and Günther Oettinger promised to end geo-blocking on the net in a great initiative from the European Commission, or what sounded like a great initiative. But in the end, we got maybe pathetic Netflix roaming if you're temporarily outside of your subscription area. And to be honest, sometimes you just have to see who the people are behind a proposal and who they claim to represent to get an understanding of what's at stake here. Ansip, the Prime Minister of Estonia, had this comment about the anti-ACTA protests in 2011 and 2012 in his country, about ISPs, internet service providers, being made police of the copyright monopoly. Quote, "These people must have eaten some seeds, and not those kind of seeds we grow in our fields. It might be helpful to put tinfoil in your hat." This was the Prime Minister's reaction to a very legitimate concern from the net generation about ACTA, which was ultimately defeated on July 4, 2012, when the European Union formally asserted its independence from American special interests. And Ansip had this to say at that point. "This rejection of ACTA cannot be considered well-founded. The problem remains unsolved." This is the guy who's tabling a revision of the copyright monopoly for the European Union at this point. You do have a pretty good fucking hunch of what's going to be in that proposal. This is the person that ignores most of the recent radar report from the European Parliament's decision on moving ahead with the copyright monopoly. The report that evaluates the InfoSoc Directive, the EUCD, European Union Copyright Directive, and so proudly presents a proposal for copyright monopoly for the net. We've only seen some of the enforcement stuff in this so far. We've seen a follow the money principle, which is, of course, SOPA revisited again. Damn again. We've seen calculations of damages. Apparently, the lost sale doctrine, every copy at a couple of trillionths of a cent, is equivalent to a lost sale at full price. And perhaps most alarmingly, we are seeing a redefinition of the term communication to the public. This is a very subtle one, but it tends to be very, very far-reaching in its consequences, because this is what the European Court of Justice weighed its ruling on Svensson versus Retriever on, the news snippets that were fully legal to publicize because they had already been publicized by an original publisher. We know that the European Commission is not happy about this, so they are going to come down with something really nasty. This has been called ancillary copyright regimes. We don't know exactly what they're up to here, but the analysis of this document has just started. So welcome to the show, Henrik. You've seen this shit go down in Brussels. What's your impression of what's happening here?
Well, first of all, these people, I would say that they are not even serious about a single digital European market. What we see when it comes to service roaming is that you might be allowed to take your Netflix account with you when you go abroad for a short period of time. We live in the modern times now. People are living in different countries. People are moving around. Of course, you should have one account for all countries, but not even that, because I suspect the movie companies and TV companies, they still want to have separate starting dates for TV series in different countries and stuff like that.
Right, this is the stuff we've seen where Australian Netflix customers actually VPN to the US to use their Netflix account inside the United States, because the offering from Netflix there is so much better. So they're being called pirates because they're using their paid Netflix account in a country they weren't supposed to be using it in. Isn't that right?
Yeah, Yeah, and it's not only better. I think the better when it comes to money. I think the important thing is that you have some serious stuff that are published earlier in the United States than in Europe or elsewhere or Australia, and that is might be actually the main reason for people wanting to use Netflix in other places.
Right. So where does this shit come from? I mean, these are politicians who are behaving like drunken elephants trumpeting about in a porcelain factory. They obviously haven't got a single clue about the damage they're causing to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, everything the net brings. So what's going on here?
Well, leaving the Netflix thing apart, there has been a long struggle in the European Union about copyright and file sharing and piracy and stuff like that. And what they are trying to do is that they are trying to repeat what they couldn't get in ACTA, and that is having the internet service providers to police the net, meaning that they will be responsible for everything their users do, and leading to that they of course will have to inspect everything you do online, everything, and then that is just absurd.
Right, for two reasons here. And we're kind of segueing into a different topic here, but bear with me. So for two reasons. The first is obviously that if you have an incentive to police stuff, but no incentive not to police it, you have no incentive to uphold the fundamental liberties of the European Union, for that matter, the human species, like freedoms of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, etc. You only have this Damocles sword hanging overhead that unless, if you miss something, you might get sued for millions by the copyright mafia. And if, on the other hand, the internet service providers are heavily lobbying for modern technology like encryption, and we are seeing encryption come into BitTorrent, we're seeing encryption come into Popcorn Time. So how does this fit with the anti-encryption agenda?
Yeah, this is a never-ending story because they didn't get it in ACTA. They will try it again. We don't have all the details on the upcoming proposals, but we know that it will be there. We suspect that it will be in the Transatlantic Trade Agreement, TTIP. They're trying again and again and again and again until they get their ideas through. It's like the referendum on the European Union Treaty on Ireland. People had to vote until they voted right.
Which they did in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, they gave up.
But there's a crack coming up here in the cohesion of the European Union, isn't there? I mean, Denmark just voted against giving more powers to the European Union in a referendum, which completely shocked the Brussels establishment, as in, what do you mean you voted no? What do you mean you're not going to have another referendum until you vote correctly? And dissent and discontent with the European Union is brewing, has been brewing for a long time. And with Britain talking loudly about an upcoming referendum whether to leave the Union entirely, are we seeing a major chasm here between two camps in the Union and how to move this Union ahead? What's your take on this?
Well, there are different camps, but it's not as simple as country against country. There are certain countries that I would say are skeptic, like Poland, the United Kingdom, although Poland, but there are real Eurosceptics in Europe. And then there are reformists. Reformists is countries like Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands, maybe Germany. We have that group of countries against the rest of the countries. But in the other countries, that there is a big opinion, a big part of a big share of the population that are just as critical against the EU as the real Eurocritic countries. So I would say it's everybody against the power elites of, let's say, France and Spain.
So ironically, you're seeing a pre-1789 situation in France, or based in France. Is that essentially what you're saying here, that there's the ivory tower versus the common people?
Well, even the French, if you ask them in opinion polls or referendums, you will find that they are very skeptical against the European Union, and many Frenchmen would like to leave it altogether. And the only option for those people is the Front National with Ms. Le Pen, and that is too bad. It's very annoying, very irritating, very disturbing that there are no serious, decent political parties who stand up for a EU reform, a smaller but sharper EU that focuses on freedom of trade and free movement, but not a lot of other stuff. But normal political parties, they don't touch this. They leave it to the extreme right, and in some cases the extreme left, and then the people vote for those parties instead. It's totally counterproductive.
Right. We are not seeing a lot of political parties stand up and defend liberty when it's inconvenient, are we? We're talking about France. So there was a terror attack in France just recently, which pretty much everybody and their brother pounced on to get their agenda through. And you had an attack from terrorists in France, which was conducted and coordinated using clear text communication, and where they used their own credit cards. And the police wasted no time in jumping on this and demanding a ban on encryption and Bitcoin, which wasn't used. Trump is completely out of his mind, which on the other hand is normal state for Donald Trump, so that's nothing new, saying we need to close down this thing called the internet. Hillary Clinton is going to Silicon Valley to make them understand they must introduce back doors into encryption. The only thing here, the only star in the sky here appears to be Switzerland, which, as a payout, is getting all the exciting business like Silent Circle and Ethereum moving in there. So what's your take on this absolute hysteria? No, not hysteria. Opportunism. Goddamn political opportunism after the Paris attacks.
Yeah, never waste a good crisis, right? Well, the Swiss are armed, actually.
Well, yes.
So that might have something to do with it. But no, it's totally absurd right now. Everyone is rushing ahead with more surveillance, more control. Of course, they don't really care about human rights, civil rights, our freedoms, because that's not going to give them any votes.
Right. So what's the driving force here? I mean, do they just want a bigger budget for their department? What makes somebody go up in the morning, get out of bed, and say, I'm going to eradicate civil liberties today? Because I don't think that's their agenda. I think their agenda is something much more basic, like a bigger budget to their department, or a higher salary, or more status.
Well, I don't say that they are evil, but this is what happens. They are only interested in one thing, and it's their own power. And to keep being in power, they need votes. And to get votes, they must frighten people, scare us about terrorism, and then pretend to solve the problem, which they, by the way, don't.
Right. I mean, this is dumb. On average, 40 people die every year in Europe from terror attacks. Now, that's 40 people too many, but it needs to be put into context. 223 people die every year, on average, in Europe from drowning in their own bathtub. That's 5 times as many. 100 times as many die, compared to terror attacks, die from falling downstairs. We should be spending trillions in a war on stairs if we're spending billions on a war on terror, but we're not. So isn't this just like, isn't this just another case of communism in the 50s, jazz music in the 30s? Isn't this just the fnord du jour that is used to frighten people and get whatever you want rammed through the legislature?
Well, your comment reminded me about in V for Vendetta, Chancellor Sutler shouting, "We must remember the people, why they need us." And that's what we are seeing.
I like that. This brings us to the current transparency problems in the European Union. Can you elaborate on those? Can you shed a little bit more light here? What's going on anyway?
Well, of course, very much in Brussels is done with secrecy in the normal cases. But now they have started to short-circuit the democratic process. Something that can run between the Commission, the Council, the European Parliament for years and years before you have a decision. And they think this is going all too slow. So now they intervene in an early point in the democratic process. They have delegations from the European Parliament, the Commission and the Council, meeting in secrecy, behind closed doors, agreeing on everything. And then everyone more or less has to accept what comes out of those so-called trialogues. And then that has moved decision-making even further away from the people. And I mean, one of the European Union's big problems is the democratic deficit. And everyone is talking about doing something about that. But actually what they are doing is doing it much, much worse.
Right. So again, where does the European Union go from here?
Well, I think it will basically get worse, actually. Sometimes I fear that we are going to get some form of very boring fascism.
Boring fascism. Okay. That sounds scary.
Stay in line. Sorry? Now you are breaking up. Okay.
Boring fascism. Now that sounds scary.
Yeah. I mean, if you stay in line, you will have no major problems with the government, probably. But if you're in opposition, if you are someone they don't like, if you have a conflict with the government, we now have the tools to go after single individuals, tools that are very much like what we saw in the old Eastern Europe system, in the fascist systems. Most people won't care. They will have a nice time. They will have some white wine and shrimps Friday evening, as we do in Sweden, and then they will have a great time. They don't care. But of course, our liberties are not about uncontroversial things. Our liberties are there to guarantee that we can express ourselves, that we can rise against government, that we can protest.
Exactly. What you're talking here about here is selective enforcement. The fact that you have dirt on every single person in a community. And when you do, the police will move from enforcing the law for a specific crime to enforcing the law onto a specific person, as in moving from solving a crime to punishing an inconvenient individual. That's called selective enforcement, and we've opened the doors to that, haven't we?
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that there's a dossier on everyone, and you can be quite sure that there are dossiers about people in power. That is nothing new. A few months ago, I was at the Stasi Museum in Berlin, where the old East German secret police had their headquarters, and in the director's safe there was a red bag, and that bag was filled with sensitive information about the leader of the East German Communist Party. So of course, those forces in the intelligence community that would like to expand their power, they don't just survey ordinary people, they don't just look for criminals, they are collecting information that can be very useful for them.
Right, it's how J. Edgar Hoover with the FBI was thought. It's not sure whether he had, but he was thought to have a file on everybody, including the decision makers who even thought about cutting down on his budget. When that happens, his budget does not get cut. So this was the case in East Germany with Stasi. This was the case in the United States with the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover. This is most likely the case with the NSA, with the BND, with GCHQ, all of the acronyms at present. So it seems we have some work ahead of us with the European Union, yeah?
Yeah, a lot.
Well, all right. Thank you for your commentary, Mr. Alexandersson. It's been a pleasure to hear your thinking on liberty and the European Union. This is Liberty Talk 45. I'm Rick Falkvinge. Visit our sponsor, Private Internet Access. Good night.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Produced using exclusively free software.